The BC Wildlife Federation's Wetlands Education Program provides educational workshops and supports wetland restoration and stewardship all across British Columbia. To highlight this work, the Wetlands team traveled to the Kootenay region to revisit several wetland projects and the stewards who have worked with the BCWF to help protect, restore, and create wetlands on private land. These inspiring people share their experiences with wetland restoration, the importance of it, and all of the benefits and challenges that come with it. Before we take you to this first property, we would like to acknowledge the First Nations and original keepers of the land. This documentary was filmed on the traditional territories of the Ktunaxa, Syilx, Tsuut'ina, and Secwepemc peoples. We start in Kimberley, BC, where retired wildlife biologist Penny Ohanjanian will share her story about the wetland restoration project on Sparrowhawk Farm.
Well, when I first moved in here to this area, in this particular property, I saw so much water, and it was spread out over meadows, maybe 2 or 3 inches deep, with sedge. I look at it and think, oh, what a person could do if you could only build some wetlands here. You could increase the diversity of birds and amphibians and other species. My name's Penny Ohanjanian, and I worked as a consulting biologist for over 30 years here in the Kootenays. They have a lot of significance because I did my master's degree at Creston on red-necked grebes, and I spent days and days and days over several years just in the marsh in canoes looking at wildlife, and they're very special places because they're so rich. It was over 2 years and 5 days each year. That was it. It was very fast. Big excavators came in and just worked away, and the water came in as they were working, and so that creates the nice water level naturally.
Yeah. Wetland restoration at Sparrowhawk Farm began in 2018, and the following year, the BCWF returned to create an additional 6 wetlands. There is now a total of 4.1 hectares of wetlands on the property. These wetlands were designed to support important habitat features for endangered and at-risk amphibians, as well as other wetland species.
A great number of duck species that we never had before. I've seen a lot of more ducks. It's just the aesthetics of it. It's peaceful, it's beautiful, and I enjoy it. Just as a former wildlife biologist, I enjoy watching the progression of nature as it gets established in a new place. Mm-hmm. We had a couple swans the very first spring. Wow. They came for a few days. And then we had white-faced ibis this year, 14 of them, which was fabulous because they're very rarely seen up here. And I'm sure there'll be other species that visit us. I think one of the dangers would be, okay, you've come in, you've created wetlands on my place, and now I'm high and dry. I don't know where to go. I don't know how to manage them. Oh dear, this might be happening. And to have the follow-up like that the crew that comes out and measures provides, that makes it very, very comforting. You know, you're not left out on your own. Unfortunately, the sheep had access to the new seeding that we put there. And as a result, the thistles came in because they ate quite a bit of the newly planted seedlings. So what I've done to change that is I'm erecting a fence that will keep the sheep out of the area where we've constructed wetlands. And that will give new plants time to establish. And we do rent pasture out for cattle, and they're held back with an electric fence, so they haven't been in the wetlands.
The next restoration project brings us to a small organic farm in the Slocan Valley. Tullaberry Farm rests alongside the Little Slocan River and is owned by husband and wife duo Alex and Judy. During the BCWF's 2013 Wetlands Institute, 0.17 hectares of marsh, swamp, and shallow water wetland habitat was constructed on their property under the supervision of wetland restoration expert Tom Biebighazer. As retired healthcare workers, Alex and Judy didn't know much about wetlands until the beaver dam supporting the wetland on their property was washed away.
There's that old saying, you don't know what you have until you lose it, and we didn't either until the beaver dam at the bottom of this wetland got blown out. And it was at that point we realized we were losing our diversity and that it was really important to do something about it. We were worried about all the animals down there, the amphibians, the frogs. We were hearing much fewer frogs. And yeah, we wanted it back.
At the outset, it was just sort of a naturally vegetated space, and the water and trees and whatnot. And in the week of the wetland development, it turned into a moonscape. It was just grey mud from bank to bank, and you could see where the ponds were going to be, but the rest of it was just muck, and it was jarring, very jarring. But you know, even by the end of the first month, the end of that first season, you could see the greenery coming back. Now the Wildlife Federation crew planted some trees, but a lot came in naturally. And now, as you've seen yourselves going down there, it's totally overgrown, and with numerous species, many more species than were there before, and many species that were not planted by the replanting of the wildlife group.
Tom reassured us too. He said, I know it looks really awful right now, but I can tell you that even by the end of the season, in 2 years, you'll never know there's been machinery in there at all.
It was a big machine too. It was the biggest excavator we've had on this property. We've had a lot of work here.
And he was right, absolutely right. So it looks horrible at the beginning, but nature comes back so fast.
I get the benefit every single day because my desk looks out onto the wetland, and so I see the wildlife coming through at different seasons, and I'll be on a Zoom call or some other kind of work-related thing, and it's a wonderful distraction, I'll tell you, to be able to look out and see the natural world.
Because of this whole experience, I am so much more aware of wetlands and the importance of wetlands. I can't think of a single challenge.
No, it was.
It's all been good.
There hasn't been any negative aspect to it. Yeah, it was a great job. It was. We didn't really have too much in the way of expectations. You know, first time through, we didn't know what was possible. But I'd say the Wildlife Federation did a great job in terms of bringing in a good designer and putting the resources in and the follow-up to make it kind of sustain it.
Yeah.
Although this next wetland project is not on private land, the community of Crawford Bay, under the leadership of the East Shore Freshwater Habitat Society, supported the Regional District of Central Kootenay in acquiring approximately 70 hectares of land to preserve as a regional park. This new park hosts Crawford Creek, quite a large wetland complex, and the eastern shoreline of Kootenay Lake. Before its acquisition, the community was concerned that this land would be purchased and developed and that they would lose these important natural areas. Mike Jeffrey, the chair of the East Shore Freshwater Habitat Society, will explain what motivated their organization to garner community support and advocate for the protection of this diverse area.
Well, the motivation to it was as it came up for sale, and we had a golf course that had been established back in the 70s, who actually had land ownership of about over 7,000 acres along the east shore here. It was going to be a big development. You know, their idea was something you'd see like at Whistler. That was the idea. And it never really went through, but they still had the land holdings, and part of it was this approximately 160 acres of, up, I think 23 lots that was on the lower part that they had always had in the back pocket that they would develop it. Well, when they decided to sell it, of course, we were concerned about others that might buy it. It is the only, it's a kilometer of lakefront on the Crawford Bay area here, and it's private land. It gave access to it. We would lose it. It would be completely lost if it was sold privately. So. Well, I think it has really grown in the last couple of years. I mean, when it first started off, people couldn't really accept, you know, it's hard to say, well, this is ours, you know, and it takes a while that you start getting there and you realize it is yours, that they start taking ownership for it. And some of the things, the small improvements we've done, like the roadway to the beach, and that was a big thing. People use this year-round for whether they're walking dogs. As you can see, we've got a great beach area here, and we're only using a small part of it. So the roadway that they put down in there with the proper access to it made a huge difference, and the community is saying, yeah, this is our regional park, and we're going to look after it now. And it's, you know, every year that goes by, it becomes, people seem to be more and more attached to it because it's, you know, they find their ways that they can use it. So yeah.
Did you notice?
Probably the amount of funding that we needed. You know, we had support from, well, you know, we even had support from BC Wildlife Federation, whether it was the promotion of what we had here that was significant. So we had letters from a lot of other groups that supported it. We had, the big thing was, it was for the regional district to be able to put a package together that would support that amount of money. And of course, Columbia Basin Trust jumped in and took a good portion of it. By no means the majority of it, but a good portion that got it to that it was something. It was like a carrot they threw out to us that said, "Look, you can get all this if you do this." Well, it's hard to turn that down, and I think that the general public on the East Shore said, "Yeah, how can we let it go when we're getting the support?" So, yeah. And one of the unfortunate things is that you need an identity to be able to hold this for years to come. And therefore you have to put it into the hands of the regional district that you're within. And that sometimes limits your ability to be able to do as a society or a group would do. But it protects it forever. So you've got to give that up. And it makes it hard to go through that process with having to deal with the regional areas and typical government or whatever that might be. But there's a good point to that, in that we all know that whatever we put into it will be protected forever. So that is one thing.
The story behind Crawford Bay Regional Park shows that even if you don't own property, there are still opportunities to get involved in conserving, protecting, or restoring wetlands and natural areas that are important to you. Following Kootenay Lake to the north, wildlife lovers Terry and Michelle Halloran own property in Meadow Creek, BC. Michelle is a former fish and wildlife technician who now specializes in wildlife photography, and Terry is a retired filmmaker best known for his Westland TV series focused on natural resource management, environmentalism, and sustainability. Their deep appreciation for nature motivated them to build and restore wetlands on their property, where they now both enjoy watching wildlife thrive.
We had a grizzly bear here started in about 2012. She was here for 2 or 3 years as a little cub. Then she disappeared for 2 years, never saw her. And then a few years ago, I was in the back and she showed up again in one of the wetlands. And she had 2 baby little cubs with her. So that's a generational thing that we have done to help sustain those critters. And, you know, no doubt those kids will be back here too one day. So I think that's the payoff for me anyway.
We were really excited. I just have to add a little bit in there because it was hard to get people to come and look at the place. We had so many frogs and toads and salamanders here, and nobody was into it. Nobody was into coming here. And so when we had the opportunity, and this place especially, to be able to dig in the winter, we were able to just open doors here and get stuff done to extend the livelihood of a lot of the creatures that are here by having, you know, deeper water for longer. We have so many new and different species that, and having them around the house, I mean, it's just a joy because there is no mosquitoes. As you notice, there is no mosquitoes because we have swallows everywhere. We have built boxes, we have put them up, we have tried to increase the amount of predators here.
The benefits I think we would both attest to is that we just have species that have never been here before. And each spring we get a new species showing up that sometimes no one's ever seen in the valley before. So for us, that's the benefit, is just seeing us living in a place where biodiversity has gone up, not down. All you're really doing by digging a wetland is you're doing two things. Number one, you're making some sites permanently wet and some sites permanently dry. And here we push dirt from around the wetlands towards the home. So we ended up with drier, more secure land, in my mind. I've been to, I don't know how many ranches or farms, and almost every one of them has had an area that the farmer has said, oh, that's just too wet to do anything with down there, so I don't bother with it. And if you convince the private landowner to do some of those things, as we were starting to see, you're going to maintain biodiversity and take land that normally they might not like and make it better and more productive for themselves. So I think there's a marriage there we can have. It's a very unusual marriage between human presence and improving biodiversity. That combination does not happen very often.
The one challenge that we did have in it was that we had some reed canary grass here. And when you have big machines moving lots of stuff around, we have a lot of it. And it wasn't that it brought it here, but they tend to literally walk over the landscape. So you've got these beautiful, you know, wetland species of grasses and sedges, and they just kind of roll over the whole wetland and it becomes the same thing. So you lose your diversity. So that is something that we are working on and kind of struggling with a little bit here.
When we started to dig the wetlands, there was a huge opposition in the valley. There was about a month there I didn't go to the store up here because people were convinced they thought we were throwing rocks at agriculture. They thought we were being hard on, you know, the heritage of the valley that was the homesteading sort of thing. The thing that changed stuff for people in the valley was, in the process of digging these 19 ponds, we'd lifted about 8 hectares, 2.5, 3 feet high. That's a huge amount of dirt. And that, as soon as we got this dug, we planted oats along the road in an area that was what you could only ever grow sedge grass in before. And every person that went by here would stop and look and go, well, that's what's been done. So in this situation, people could see the benefits. So we ended up with getting flack for doing that, and then we had Nature Trust dug ponds next to us. Our neighbor dug 6 or 7 ponds. Neighbor to the north dug some ponds. So it's been a complete turnaround in mindset. And aside from that, in a nutshell, anybody with half an acre can put in a wetland and plant native species and make a difference.
Each of these projects and the people behind them have done incredible conservation work. We wanted to know what inspired them to do it and what advice they would give to others who are interested in doing similar work.
Well, I think, you know, we've taken so much from the land in agriculture and in just general human development. And I think it's important to give back because wetlands are declining everywhere. Many have been drained, and a lot of habitat's been lost and continues to be lost. Not only wetlands, of course, forests as well, and grasslands. They're all impacted.
For sure.
The more you read, the more you realize all over the world wetlands are in trouble and they need attention. And so the fact that we were able to do something positive for a wetland on this little tiny piece of property made me feel much better.
So yes, it does take money to preserve these wildlands, but you know, we're taking a lot of money out of these forests, and part of the reason we need to preserve these little wetlands is because so much has been taken out, particularly upstream in our valley, in terms of the resources that belong to everyone in the province. And so I think making some contribution back from that towards preserving a small amount of wild space is really important.
We said no matter who you are and no matter what reason you wanted to be part of this, is that they're going to leave a legacy for somebody else, you know, and they love the Kootenays, they love the area that's here, and so what can I do when I leave? What can I leave for somebody else? Well, this is what you can leave, and you're a small part of it, but it's all of us that's been able to do it, and I think that to me means a lot, that we're all part of it, you know. So yeah.
To everybody, water is what it's all about. It's what it's all about. We need to protect it, enhance it, and all the wildlife that goes with it. Everybody needs to do that, even if they have a little yard. Dig a pond, grow some native plants and flowers for everything. It's wetlands are incredible. They're the start of life, really.
I would say make sure your livestock is off the seeding, because that was my mistake.
As far as advice, the only thing is I kind of wish we'd made it bigger to begin with. There is another area, as you noticed below, and it's, you know, it's been so successful and so such a pleasure to see the development, the site naturally kind of evolving, I suppose, that it would have been nice if there were more of it. But that's a very minor quibble.
But I think today people like us, and there's been a couple of major ones within Central Kootenay area that have done the same thing now, is talk to them, use them as a resource in what the people and the communities have done. And that always inspires people to see something that's been done elsewhere and says, yeah, look at what they did and look at what we can do. Because they can't always see the end result. But if we have some good examples now, and this is one of them, to what can be done, but
Speak, but all I can say is, if anybody, put this, there's too many times in the world that we as individuals think we cannot do anything to enhance or secure or sustain the natural world around us. Most of us feel very crippled in that regard. When it comes to private land and it comes to wetland, as I mentioned, whether you have 1,000 acres or half an acre, you can dig a small pond, whether it's 600 square feet or 2 hectares in your backyard, and bring biodiversity and endangered species into your neighborhood. And as is part of the one species of a planet of many, maybe we should all do that.